George Best. George Best rose faster than anyone in his era. At Manchester United, his dribbling, swagger, and unpredictable brilliance made him the face of European football before he was old enough to rent a car. In 1968, he delivered the performance that defined him, an electric display against Benfica in the European Cup that ended with a solo goal and a Ballon d'Or at just 22. He was already a superstar, already adored, already everywhere. But that meteoric rise came with a cost, because once Best reached the top, everything around him began to collapse. Fame didn't just follow him, it swallowed him. The endless nights out, the celebrity lifestyle, the constant attention, the pressure to be George Best every single day. Alcohol became the escape, the thing he could control when everything else felt impossible. Training sessions were missed, curfews were ignored. United tried fines, suspensions, private talks. Nothing changed. His relationship with the club deteriorated, slowly at first, then all at once. By 1972, the decline was visible every time he stepped on the pitch. He was still gifted, still capable of brilliance, but the focus was gone. The hunger was gone. And the discipline that once held his genius together had completely evaporated. At 27, an age where most legends begin their true prime, Best's top-flight career was effectively finished. He spent the next decade drifting between clubs, continents, and moments of fleeting promise. But the player who once dominated Europe never returned. José Rodríguez was once the brightest light in Real Madrid's academy. At La Fábrica, he tore through youth defences with pace, power, and the fearlessness of a future superstar. His breakout moment came in 2014, when he scored the winner against Atletico Madrid in the Copa del Rey, calm, clinical, and delivered on a massive stage. Madrid believed they had found their next homegrown star, a player who could one day inherit the role vacated by legends. The club protected him, invested in him, and promoted him as the academy's new crown jewel. But then everything changed. In March 2014, José suffered a devastating ACL tear, an injury that arrived at the worst possible moment. Just as he was breaking into a world-class squad, his explosiveness dipped, his confidence faded, and the momentum he'd built vanished. Madrid waited, but the old José never truly returned, and instead of fighting his way back, his focus began to drift far from football. He launched a reggaeton music career. He immersed himself in celebrity culture, partying, recording music videos, and appearing in reality TV storylines that overshadowed anything he did on the pitch. Training intensity fell, discipline wavered. Loan spells at PSG, Stoke, Betis, and Sporting became a cycle. Brief flashes of ability drowned out by distractions, inconsistent effort, and off-field drama that followed him everywhere. By the time top clubs gave up on him, José wasn't viewed as a lost talent. He was viewed as someone who no longer prioritised football at all. José Rodríguez didn't just fall from the spotlight. He walked away from it, choosing a lifestyle louder than the career he once seemed destined to dominate. Hidetoshi Nakata was more than just a midfielder. He was a cultural revolution. Before him, Asian players were viewed with skepticism in Europe's elite leagues. Nakata arrived in Serie A, then the most difficult defensive league on earth, and treated it with disdainful ease. He was the Japanese Beckham, an icon of fashion and skill who commanded the midfield. His immortality was secured in 2001. Playing for Roma against rivals Juventus, he replaced the legendary Francesco Totti and turned the title race on its head. He unleashed a 25-metre rocket that silenced the stadium, effectively handing Roma the Scudetto. But while the world worshipped him, Nakata felt hollow. To him, football had ceased to be a game. It had become a business. The relentless schedule, the media circus, and the weight of carrying an entire nation's hopes turned his passion into a chore. He famously admitted that playing football had become like breathing, necessary but devoid of joy. The end was cinematic. At the 2006 World Cup, after a crushing loss to Brazil, Nakata didn't storm off. He lay down in the centre circle of the Dortmund Stadium, staring up at the sky for 10 minutes while the fans left. He was saying goodbye. Days later, At just 29, he retired. He didn't quit because his legs gave out. He quit because his heart did. Nakata walked away to see the world, proving that sometimes the bravest thing a superstar can do is stop. Marco van Basten. Marco van Basten was the most complete striker the game has ever seen. Standing 1.88 metres tall, he possessed the physical presence of a target man, but moved with the grace of a ballerina. They called him the Swan of Utrecht for a reason. He didn't just score goals, he created art. His volley in the Euro '88 final, struck from an impossible 0-degree angle, remains the definitive argument for his genius. With 3 Ballon d'Ors and back-to-back European Cups with AC Milan, he was the undisputed king of world football in the early 90s. But beneath the elegance, a tragedy was unfolding. In an era where defenders were allowed to tackle from behind without mercy, Van Basten's right ankle was systematically destroyed. The cartilage deteriorated, turning every step into agony. He played through pain thresholds that would have hospitalised normal men. The surgeries were primitive and frequent, and eventually, the medical interventions did more damage than the tackles. He played his final match, the 1993 Champions League final, at just 28 years old. He was at his absolute peak, yet he was finished. He spent 2 years fighting to return, but the joint was ruined. His retirement speech at the San Siro remains one of football's most heartbreaking images, standing in a suede jacket, waving to the crowd, while his coach, Fabio Capello, wept on the bench. Van Basten didn't decline. He was stolen from the game. He remains the only player to retire, while arguably still being the best player on earth. Ruben de la Red. Ruben de la Red was the homegrown hero Real Madrid had been waiting for. A graduate of La Fábrica, he was a midfielder of pure elegance, possessing the vision, poise, and tactical intelligence to dictate games at the highest level. After a brilliant loan spell at Getafe, he cemented his status during Spain's Euro 2008 triumph, scoring a stunning half-volley against Greece that showcased his supreme technique. He returned to the Bernabeu not as a prospect, but as a future starter, ready to orchestrate Madrid's midfield for the next decade. But on a cold night in October 2008, silence fell over the stadium. During a Copa del Rey match against Real Union, de la Red didn't go down from a tackle. As he jogged back into position, he simply collapsed face forward onto the turf. Coming shortly after the tragic death of Antonio Puerta, the panic was immediate and visceral. Medics rushed in, and though he regained consciousness, the game and his life had changed forever. Doctors discovered a rare, chronic heart condition. While his legs were ready to conquer Europe, his heart couldn't survive the strain. For 2 years, he waited for a medical miracle, but the science was absolute. Continuing to play was a death sentence. At just 25, he officially retired. Ruben de la Red's career didn't decline. It was extinguished. He left the game as a European champion, and a tragic reminder that sometimes an athlete is defeated by the one opponent they cannot see. Andy van der Meijde looked like the next great Dutch winger. At Ajax, he was everything their academy values: quick, technical, intelligent, and fearless in one-on-one situations. His breakout came during the 2002 Champions League run, where his goal against Roma and electric performances on the right wing made Europe take notice. Inter Milan paid to bring him in, believing his pace and creativity could lift their attack. He never fully settled in Italy, but the talent was still clear enough for Everton to gamble on him, hoping the Premier League would unlock the version of Van der Meijde Ajax once showcased. But once he arrived in England, everything fell apart. Injuries were the first hit. Consistent knocks, lingering muscle issues, and poor fitness prevented him from ever building momentum. Then life off the pitch began to cave in. His drinking spiraled, his marriage deteriorated. He struggled with depression and isolation in a new country. Instead of becoming Everton's spark, he became a constant worry for the staff. Missed trainings, late-night incidents, and moments that made it clear his life was drifting out of control. Clashes with managers followed. David Moyes demanded professionalism Van der Meijde couldn't provide at that stage of his life. The club fined him repeatedly, benched him, and eventually gave up hope that he could turn things around. By the time he left Everton, his top-level career was effectively over. Andy van der Meijde didn't fade because he lacked talent. He faded because the weight of his personal struggles became heavier than the football he once lived for. Owen Hargreaves built a career on relentlessness. At Bayern Munich, he became one of Europe's most versatile midfielders, pressing, tackling, intercepting, and covering ground in a way few players could match. His breakthrough performance came in the 2001 Champions League semi-finals, where his energy and discipline helped Bayern shut down a powerful Real Madrid midfield. Months later, he lifted the trophy at just 20 years old. When Manchester United signed him for a significant fee in 2007, they believed they were adding the final piece to a title-winning core. And for one season, they were right. Hargreaves was outstanding, especially in the 2008 Champions League run, scoring a crucial free kick against Arsenal and playing a key role in the final against Chelsea. But then the machine broke down. Hargreaves developed chronic patellar tendinitis, a condition where the tendons in his knees effectively began to degenerate. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, agonising erosion. The pain was so severe he often couldn't walk downstairs, let alone press opponents. The tragedy culminated in 2010 against Wolves. After 2 years of brutal rehab and isolation, he finally started a match. 5 minutes later, he limped off in tears, his body rejecting the return. It was one of the saddest sights Old Trafford ever witnessed. A brief, desperate move to Manchester City changed nothing. Hargreaves didn't retire. He was forced to surrender to a body that had turned against him, leaving behind a legacy of what if that rivals any player of his generation. Bojan Krkić. Bojan Krkić was supposed to be Barcelona's next phenomenon. In La Masia, he shattered Lionel Messi's youth scoring records, an unheard-of achievement that immediately branded him as the new Messi. At just 17, he broke into Barcelona's first team and looked fearless, combining sharp movement with a natural instinct for goal. His breakout match came against Villarreal in 2007, where he scored and became the youngest league scorer in club history. Barcelona believed they had found their next global superstar. The comparisons, the headlines, the expectations, they arrived before he even finished growing. But the pressure didn't push Bojan forward. It crushed him. Behind the talent was a teenager, quietly drowning in anxiety. Before Euro 2008, he suffered a severe panic attack that left him unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to function. Instead of receiving support, he felt he had to hide it. Speaking openly meant looking weak. Admitting fear meant disappointing the people who believed he'd become the next Messi. So he kept the truth to himself, while the weight of expectation followed him everywhere. His confidence eroded. Every missed chance felt heavier. Every dip in form brought louder questions. Barcelona loaned him out to Roma, Milan, Ajax, Stoke, Alaves, but the spark never fully returned. He played well in flashes, but the freedom he once had evaporated under years of pressure he never knew how to manage. By his mid-20s, Bojan wasn't battling defenders. He was battling himself. Slowly, quietly, he slid down the football pyramid, still talented, but unable to carry the burden placed on him as a boy. Eden Hazard. Eden Hazard was the Premier League's king of joy. He didn't just dribble, he danced. At Chelsea, he was unplayable, a low-gravity genius who bounced off defenders and won titles with a smile on his face. His farewell in the 2019 Europa League final was a masterpiece. 2 goals, an assist, and a trophy. It was the perfect audition for his childhood dream. When Real Madrid paid €115 million for him, they weren't just buying a player, they were buying the heir to Cristiano Ronaldo. But the dream died before the ink was dry. Hazard arrived at pre-season overweight, a decision that haunted him when his body began to crumble. A tackle by Thomas Meunier against PSG shattered his ankle, and with it, his career. The metal plate installed in his foot became a prison. The explosive burst, that 0 to 60 acceleration that defined his game, was gone. He became a ghost, terrified to turn, scared to sprint. The Bernabeu, a stadium that demands perfection, turned on him. The press mocked his weight. The fans mocked his injury record. For 4 years, he was the world's most expensive spectator. At 32, he didn't just retire, he evaporated. There was no guard of honour, no final lap. Fernando Torres. Fernando Torres was once the most feared striker on the planet. At Atletico Madrid, he became El Niño, the golden child who carried a club on his back before he could legally drink. But it was at Liverpool where he reached his true peak. His performance against Real Madrid in 2009, dominating their backline, scoring effortlessly, and bullying world-class defenders, felt like a generational announcement. Torres had it all: acceleration, timing, finishing, and an instinct for space that defenders couldn't solve. So when Chelsea paid a British record £50 million for him in January 2011, it felt like the natural next chapter, a move worthy of the world's best striker. But almost immediately, everything unravelled. Torres arrived carrying a knee injury that had quietly drained his most important weapon, his explosiveness. The first few matches revealed it brutally. The bursts were slower, the sharp cuts dulled, the separation he once created with ease vanished. Chelsea's system didn't suit him, but the deeper issue became painfully clear. His body simply couldn't do what it used to. As the physical decline set in, the psychological collapse followed. Each missed chance chipped away at his confidence. Then came that infamous open goal miss against Manchester United, an image replayed endlessly, turning a Ballon d'Or level striker into a punchline overnight. The pressure of the fee, the expectations, the constant scrutiny, it suffocated him. Torres still produced big moments. Barcelona in 2012, Benfica in the Europa League, but they were isolated flashes, not revivals. His career drifted through Milan and Japan, a quiet echo of the player he once was. Fernando Torres didn't fall because he forgot how to score. He fell because injury stole his greatest weapon, and the world never let him recover from what was taken. Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson was meant to be the future of Manchester City, and many believed the future captain of England. At 18, he broke into City's midfield with maturity far beyond his age. Composed on the ball, strong in duels, and fearless carrying the game forward. His breakout came in 2007 against Derby County, where he scored a stunning long-range winner that announced him as one of the Premier League's brightest young prospects. City's academy raved about him. Sven-Göran Eriksson built midfield plans around him, and the English press called him a guaranteed international. He was viewed as a cornerstone of the new Manchester City era that was about to emerge. But while the rise was rapid, the collapse was devastating. Johnson's body began to fail him first. Persistent abdominal and knee injuries that refused to heal, each recovery followed by another setback. The frustration mounted, and behind the scenes, deeper struggles surfaced. Johnson battled severe mental health issues throughout his early 20s, issues he hid from teammates, coaches, and fans. His isolation grew. Training sessions became harder, not physically, but mentally. His confidence evaporated. His weight fluctuated dramatically as he drifted away from the structure football provided. Manchester City tried rehabilitation programs, private support, and repeated opportunities. But Johnson couldn't escape the spiral. By 24, long before his prime, he walked away from the game entirely. No comeback attempts, no lower league rebuilding, just a clean break from a sport that had once promised him everything. He later re-emerged far from the spotlight, opening an estate agency and choosing a quiet, private life. Hatem Ben Arfa. Hatem Ben Arfa wasn't just a footballer. He was supposed to be the chosen one. At the legendary Clairefontaine Academy, he was the crown jewel, a prodigy with a left foot that didn't just dribble, it humiliated. When he broke into a dominant Lyon side, he looked destined for greatness. His breakout moment in 2008 against PSG wasn't just a goal, it was a promise. He glided past defender after defender, cutting inside with technical perfection that screamed world class. But that promise was the only thing he ever truly kept. When he arrived at Newcastle, the fans thought they had signed a saviour. For brief, shining moments, they were right. Who can forget those solo runs against Bolton or Blackburn? In those seconds, Ben Arfa was arguably the best technical player in the league, but his career became a tragedy of consistency. He was a player of moments, not seasons. Behind the scenes, the genius was unmanageable. He clashed with Didier Deschamps at Marseille and was eventually exiled at Newcastle due to poor fitness and discipline. A brief, spectacular renaissance at Nice earned him a dream move to PSG, but it ended in the nightmare of the reserves, wasting his prime watching from the stands. Ben Arfa's story is the ultimate cautionary tale. He possessed the raw ability of the world's best, but proved that without mental discipline, even infinite talent is worthless. Antonio Cassano. Antonio Cassano was meant to be the heir to Roberto Baggio. Born in Bari, he possessed a raw, natural technique that academies simply cannot teach. At 17, he produced a moment that defined his potential against Inter Milan. Running at full speed, he controlled a 40-metre pass with a precise heel touch, beating the defence and finishing with the composure of a veteran. That night, Italy found its new star. Roma paid a fortune for him, and Real Madrid followed, believing they had signed the world's next creative genius. But in Madrid, the jewel lost its shine. Cassano viewed professional discipline as optional, while teammates like Beckham and Zidane maintained elite fitness. Cassano indulged. His weight fluctuated drastically as he traded training intensity for a poor diet and a chaotic lifestyle. The Spanish press mocked him as El Gordito, the little fatty. The club fined him for his weight, but he simply didn't care. Worse were the Cassanatas, his infamous outbursts. He insulted referees, argued with Fabio Capello, and destroyed the team's harmony. He treated his career casually, as if his talent alone exempted him from the rules. Later spells at Sampdoria and Milan offered fleeting glimpses of his vision, but the consistency was gone. Antonio Cassano's story is a frustrating one because he didn't fail due to pressure. He failed because he refused to make the sacrifices required to stay at the top. Ravel Morrison. Ravel Morrison remains the most painful what-if in modern English football. Inside the high-pressure walls of Manchester United's academy, he wasn't just a prospect, he was a phenomenon. Sir Alex Ferguson, a manager who developed Giggs, Scholes and Ronaldo, famously stated that Morrison was the best natural talent he had ever seen at 14. He was the jewel of the 2011 FA Youth Cup winning side, overshadowing even Paul Pogba with a technical ability that felt alien. He didn't just run, he floated, ghosting past defenders who were too terrified to make a tackle. But the brilliance on the pitch was constantly at war with the chaos off it. His background was complicated, and the distractions were relentless. Legal issues and a lack of professional structure chipped away at his future. United tried to protect him, but eventually, even Ferguson realised the environment was toxic for his growth. He was sold to West Ham, where he produced one final moment of magic, a solo run against Tottenham, where he humiliated the defence with a single body feint before chipping the keeper. But that goal was a mirage. Morrison descended into a nomadic existence, drifting through Lazio, Mexico, Sweden, and the English lower leagues. He became a collector of jerseys rather than trophies. Every manager thought they could fix him. None could. Ravel Morrison didn't fail due to a lack of magic. He failed because talent without stability is like a Ferrari without an engine. Beautiful to look at, but ultimately going nowhere. Jack Wilshere. English football rarely produces players like Jack Wilshere. He was a paradox. A gritty English street fighter with the velvet touch of a La Masia graduate. At 19, he produced the single greatest midfield performance by an English teenager in history. Facing Guardiola's Barcelona, the greatest team of the era, Wilshere didn't just survive the passing carousel of Xavi, Iniesta and Busquets. He hijacked it. He took the ball in tight spaces, burst through the press, and dictated the game with a fearless arrogance. That night in 2011 wasn't just a match. It was supposed to be a coronation, but the very trait that made him special, his bravery to hold the ball until the last second to draw a defender in, became his undoing. He invited heavy tackles, and his ankles paid the price. It began with a stress fracture, then spiralled into a decade of surgical tables and lonely rehab sessions. Every time Jack was back, a new injury was waiting around the corner. The explosive burst that allowed him to glide past players evaporated. Stints at West Ham and Bournemouth were desperate attempts to outrun his own physiology, but the damage was irreversible. By the time he retired at just 30, The diagnosis was brutal. His knees had almost no cartilage left. He was playing bone on bone. Jack Wilshere didn't fail. He was a Ferrari engine put inside a chassis that simply couldn't handle the horsepower, forcing him to park the car before the race was ever truly run. Abou Diaby. Abou Diaby was supposed to be Arsenal's next midfield powerhouse. At 19, he broke into Arsenal's first team and immediately looked like the missing piece Wenger had been searching for. His best early performance came against Bolton in 2006, where he dominated midfield with strength and composure far beyond his. Arsenal fans thought they were watching the start of a decade-long career at the top. The club believed it too. Diaby had the ceiling of a superstar, but all of it changed with one tackle. In May 2006, Sunderland's Dan Smith lunged in late, smashing Diaby's ankle and causing a fracture so severe that surgeons initially feared long-term structural damage. He returned, but the consequences followed him for the rest of his career. His gait changed, his mechanics shifted, and his muscular system spent years overcompensating for the original injury. What should have been a single setback became the spark for more than 40 injuries across the next decade. Diaby never enjoyed rhythm again. Every time he looked ready for a breakthrough, another setback, a calf tear, a hamstring strain, a knee problem, then another. Arsenal tried modified training, tailored recovery, and specialist programs. But Diaby's body simply couldn't hold together. He spent season after season watching from the sidelines, his talent visible but unreachable.